Hello and welcome to What Helen Reads. I'm Helen and today I'm going to be talking about two different books but with the same trope and trying to analyse why I thoroughly enjoyed one of them and didn't care so much about the other. So these two books I'm going to be talking about today. The first one is Praise by Sara Cate and the second one is Embers by Claire Kent. So first up then, Praise by Sara Cate. So if you've watched any booktubers that read romance, I'm sure they've mentioned this book. It's been highly recommended, highly rated and well received in the booktube community at large. And I know most of you who have read it as well probably also enjoyed it. At the time of writing, the book currently has a star rating of 4.16 on Goodreads with over 3,500 reviews. So you can see that it's been really popular, really well received. And like I say, particularly in the booktube and Instagram community where many of the people who have reviewed this book absolutely love it. It didn't really hit the mark for me though, and I personally rated it just 3 stars. Now it's worth saying here that I am a very strict star rater and I go by the Goodreads descriptions of the star ratings. So rating it 3 stars does not mean by any stretch that I didn't enjoy the book or I didn't like it at all. I just liked it. I didn't love it and I didn't really like it. I just liked it. So 3 stars is still a pretty solid rating as far as I'm concerned. But like I said, it didn't 100% hit the mark, wasn't quite a favourite for me. And I'll go on to explain why. So if you haven't heard about this book, then I'll give you a brief explanation of what it's about. Praise is the first book in the Salacious Plays Club, which is a 4-part series and it's set around a sex club called the Salacious Plays Club and it's owned by 4 people and each of the people who own the club get their own book. The book does have a praise kink in it, hence the name of the book, but the main trope that I'm really focused on are 2 tropes. One is an age gap and the second one is it revolves around an ex-boyfriend's father. So the book starts where our heroine Charlotte has recently fallen out with her boyfriend Beau and they used to share a apartment together and now they're moving out of the apartment and she wants half of the bond back that she put in when they first moved in. Now Beau doesn't have this money, his father has it, so she basically says that she has to go and see his father to ask for half of the money back. Now conveniently, Beau is actually estranged from his father, so he has never met Charlotte, so his father Emerson does not know what Charlotte looks like. So you can kind of guess where this is going because if you remember I said that Emerson was part owner in the sex club and he's very much a dominant and when she turns up he doesn't know who she is but he mistakes her for his new submissive. So when she asks for her money he pretty much says if she wants her money she needs to get on her knees in his office, which of course she does because what girl wouldn't do that if Emerson asked her to, and she realises that she kind of likes being submissive and when he tells her that she's been a very good girl then this kind of sets off her own curiosity about her sexuality and what that means. But it doesn't take very long until Emerson realises the mistake that he's made and is very embarrassed and upset about the mistake that he's made and he apologises and as part of this apology he knows that she needs a job and he offers her a job as his assistant. Now, of course, they already have great chemistry together. She's already very intrigued about the lifestyle. So as the book goes on, it really is the start of their relationship with each other and her exploring her sexuality, him allowing her to do it in a very safe environment. But it also leads to a lot of conflict. And this is the bit where I had a real struggle with this book. And the reason is because the majority of this book is spent with Emerson really struggling to come to terms with his relationship with Charlotte. He has this ongoing internal monologue about how they shouldn't be together, how it's a really big age gap, how he shouldn't be going out with his son's ex-girlfriend. And as a result, he kind of like attempts to push her away, but his attraction to her is so great that he can't bring himself to stop seeing her, yet he doesn't want anyone to know about it because he doesn't want Beau to find out, and so he very much keeps her as his dirty little secret. And you know, he is trying to build a relationship with his son, so partly I understand why he's worried that his son will find out and be upset about it. But ultimately, I really just wanted Emerson the whole time to stop, you know, arguing with himself and just admit that he wanted to be with Charlotte, and therefore just be honest with his son and really take the bull by the horns and just tell his son to do one, essentially. Now, I saw a great review on Goodreads, which I'm going to read out now, and it said, "I enjoy male characters that would stop at nothing for what they want, and this guy was pretty easily deterred." And I completely agree with that. Emerson just wasn't alpha enough for me. He was a bit of a wimp, and he didn't stand up for what he believed in. And really, that is why I personally rated it 3 stars. I think it could have been so much better if he was just a bit more ballsy about it. Although I kind of I do sympathise with him a little bit, but ultimately I felt really bad for Charlotte that she was kind of like kept as a bit of a secret, and he wouldn't really stand up for what he wanted and just tell Beau what was going on. That said, I did really enjoy it. It was well written, well paced. It had a lot of fun and spicy scenes in it. And it also does a great job of setting up the rest of the series for the Salacious Players Club. And like I said, I would highly recommend that whole series. If you're going to read it, then you do need to start with Praise, and books 2 and 3, in my opinion, are the best. Right, so next up we have Embers by Claire Kent. Now, Embers is the 3rd book in the Kindled series by Claire Kent, and it's set in a post-apocalyptic world. And at the time of filming, this book has a star rating of 4.11 on Goodreads with just 83 reviews. And so this isn't as well read as Praise, but I think the people who have read it thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm one of them. I gave this book actually 5 stars, and it's my favourite in the Kindled series so far. And this is pretty big news because I don't rate books 5 stars very often. And as I said before, I'm a fairly strict star rater, so giving it 5 stars means I absolutely loved this book. So while this one doesn't actually include any sex kinks as such, the trope here is very much of that taboo relationship with the age gap and the ex-boyfriend's father. So this is how they're similar to each other. But they're very different in terms of the environment they're actually set in, because as I said, Embers is set in a post-apocalyptic world, and recently the Earth has been hit by an asteroid. It's wiped out a good portion of the human population, and the humans that are left are just fighting to survive. So it's, you know, they don't have any electricity, they have to grow their own crops, they have to find their own water, they have to hunt their own animals, and also they are struggling because of roaming gangs that try and take people's resources. And so it's you know, it's quite a harsh environment to be living in. So at the start of Embers, we meet our heroine Rachel, and she's still with her boyfriend Derek. And when the the asteroid hit Earth, they were together, and she ended up living with him and his mother in a house in a village or a town, and they were living there quite successfully for some time. Unfortunately, his mother dies because a lot of people in this world die of lung disease because of the toxicity in the air following the asteroid hit and the poor air quality. So his mother passes away, and she's just left with Derek, and they're doing okay for a while, but basically one of these roving gangs comes through town, their resources and lives are threatened, and they need to escape. Now, Derek has a father called Cal, and he's estranged from Cal, but he knows where he lives, and Cal is an ex-con. He is not a good man, but he lives on his own out in the wilderness in a cabin, and it's very self-sustaining kind of cabin. So when this band comes through town, Derek says to Rachel, "I think our best bet is to go and find my dad, and my dad will take us in and look after us." So that is how Rachel and Cal meet each other. Now, they live together for a few months, but unfortunately Derek also then succumbs to the lung disease and eventually passes away, and Rachel is left alone with Cal. And while their relationship is very awkward to start with, she doesn't really like Cal. She's a bit scared of him. She knows he's not a good person, and also she doesn't really like the fact that he was estranged from Derek at a time when Derek really needed him, and so they don't get off on a great footing. But as time goes by, and in fact years go by, they develop a very companionable relationship, where they kind of learn to live side by side together and kind of make a life together. And over the years, because it is several years, 3 or 4 years, they eventually form a really close friendship and then ultimately a romantic relationship. So as a result of this, very much like Praise, quite a big portion of this book deals with Cal's reluctance to have a relationship with Rachel, and his internal struggle to come to terms with the fact that she's a lot younger than him, that she's his son's ex-girlfriend, because he passed away, and he really doesn't think he's good enough for Rachel, because he was a bad man in the past. And he also worries he's taken advantage of her, because when she arrives at his house, she's still quite young, just in her late teens, and she's a virgin. And so he very much feels like he's taken advantage of her, and also that she has no other option, because they're secluded in a cabin, they're sort of together. And while later in the book they do meet other groups, and they start building relationships with other people from previous books, he very much believes that, she has no choice but to be with him. And given a real world situation, like in the past, he's someone that she would never ever be anywhere near in a million years. So he continues to struggle with this quite a lot throughout the book. However, unlike in Praise, I loved every minute of this struggle, because it felt real, and I believed every minute of the angst and the despair, the sorrow, and ultimately the joy that came with this relationship. And because of that, it's one of my favourites of the Kindle series so far. So now let's put them side by side. But to give this a bit of context, I wanted to explain that after I read Praise, I tried several times to do a review about it, because I really wanted to try to articulate why I didn't love it as much as other people had maybe loved it. And I really struggled with it. And so I ended up abandoning that review. But then a couple of months after that, I read Embers. And after I read Embers, I kind of was lying there at night, as you do, thinking about the book that I just read, and compared it to Praise in my head. And I thought, what made me love Embers so much when it had a very similar trope, while I maybe didn't appreciate Praise quite as much? And I thought it would make a great video for me to try and put them side by side, and to explain a little bit more about why one worked and one didn't. The obvious answer is that Praise is a contemporary novel set in modern day America, while Embers is set in a post-apocalyptic world where they're fighting for their very survival. And who doesn't like a survival romance? I certainly do. But I think it's more than that. I think Cal's inner struggle is more justified in my eyes than Emerson's, while no less valid. But I kind of believed it a little bit more. At the end of the day, he wasn't a good man. He was an ex-con. He'd done some criminal activity. And that criminal activity actually does come to bite them later on in the book. So he's more than justified to put, A and B together and come out with C. And his argument that he's not good enough for Rachel kind of does hit home. And also, he does believe that he's taken advantage of her, because their situation is very different. They're alone together in a cabin. He's the only man around. She's the only woman around. And so and as the older person, he feels it's his responsibility to make the best decisions. And that if it was a real life environment, or she had more options, that she would definitely choose somebody else and she wouldn't choose him. And so I think that is all very valid and fair. Also, the fact that she's his son's ex-girlfriend also comes into play here, but I think the two situations are quite different again from Praise to what's going on in Embers, because in Embers, obviously Derek has died, so he's no longer around to defend himself or have a conversation with Cal. But also many years have passed since Derek died, so while he does die at the start of this novel, their relationship develops over a series of years. It's now 3 or 4 years later when they actually enter a relationship. So they've had more time to kind of get to know each other and to really think about what they're doing. And at the end of the day, Derek did ask Cal to make sure that Rachel was protected and looked after. So I don't think Derek would be upset in any way about their relationship. On the other hand, in Praise, Emerson's son, Beau, is still very much alive, but also he's a bit of a jerk. In my opinion, he doesn't deserve the loyalty or the consideration that Emerson tries to show him. For a start, he cheated on Charlotte, and that cheating is the reason why they split up. And also, he is the one that stopped speaking to his dad, mainly because his dad started the sex club and he's embarrassed about that. He doesn't understand why his dad would want to do that, and so he's basically stopped speaking to Emerson as a result. So all in all, like I said, Beau is a bit of a jerk and therefore does not, in my opinion, deserve Emerson's, you know, consideration or loyalty from that perspective. In addition to that, Charlotte and Rachel are very different people. You know, Charlotte is has previously had boyfriends, sexual relationships. She's not a virgin. She discovers that she has a bit of a kink, and she goes out of her way to research what that means. She wants to find out more about the sex club, and she's very intrigued about that. She's also sort of like the instigator or the aggressor a lot of the times in the relationship. So she pretty much asks Emerson to show her more of this lifestyle and to be with her. And so she is much more in control from that side of things than Rachel is in Embers. So I guess ultimately, even if as a reader we know Cal was wrong, because we learn that he's done some bad things in his past, but he is ultimately a good person and he's doing what he thinks is best for Rachel. The internal struggle that Cal goes through seems more realistic and relevant and real than what Emerson is going through. In addition to that, I think that Cal makes the decisions he does because he very much wants to give Rachel the best opportunity and to make sure she's making the right decisions and give her time and space to kind of make her own decisions. So he sacrifices his own happiness to make sure that Rachel has options, which I really appreciated, even though I didn't agree with it. On the flip side, I feel Emerson's decision making is more about his son than it is about Charlotte, because he's so concerned about what Beau thinks that he doesn't really give any consideration to Charlotte. And I really didn't like the fact that he kind of kept the relationship secret, that she became his dirty little secret, and she, like, you know, couldn't fully embrace the relationship as she wanted to, because Emerson was more concerned about his son than he was about her. That's how I interpreted it anyway. So that's my side impression of two very different books with similar tropes. So despite what I've said, I highly recommend both books. I think the Salacious Players Club as a whole is a brilliant series. Books 2 and 3 in particular I really enjoyed, and I do think you need to read Praise in order to read that series. In addition to that, loads of people absolutely love that book, so I would highly recommend you reading it, even though I personally gave it 3 stars. I don't regret reading it at all, and I definitely recommend it. In addition to that, Embers is part of the Kindle series, and the Kindle series is also really, really good. So while Embers is my favourite, the rest of the series is also brilliant, so I'd recommend you check that out for sure. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and remember to like, subscribe and ring the notification bell if you want to see more content from me. In the meantime, please take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Don't you just hate it when you've spent 40 minutes trying to record a video, get downstairs and realise the sound wasn't on? So next up we have Embers by Claire Kent. Oh, shall I be doing that while scratching my face? So as I went to bed, shortly after reading the second book, the obvious answer is of course the setting, because Praise is set, the obvious answer, let's start again. And on the flip side, I felt that Emerson very much focused, start again. So we're back.